Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no more lies. We'll never know.
The Pirates took it to the big boys in Milwaukee last night, sitting 44-47. And by the time you hear this, they could either be 44-48 or 45-47. And the Pirates fans are living and dying by each game, bringing back for probably about the sixth or seventh time here. I don't know how many times here now. Bringing back former Pittsburgh Pirate, current color commentator for SportsNet Pittsburgh, John "Rock" Wehner. How you doing today, Rock?
I'm doing good. Milwaukee's a great place. I love coming to Milwaukee, and I love seeing the Pirates break out the bats here in Milwaukee. This place has been a house of horrors over the last couple of decades, and so nice to see the Pirates hit a bunch of homers, win the first game of a series. It'd be nice to at least win this series against the Brewers, because obviously if you have any idea or any thoughts of winning this division, you're going to have to beat the Brewers when you play them.
Yeah, and I heard a stat on the TV side. You were on the radio side last night, and it was something like that if the Brewers out-homer the Pirates in Milwaukee over a certain time span, that the Pirates are like 10-66 or some astronomical number like that, which would make sense. If you get out homered, you're more than likely going to get beat. But the Pirates definitely have been hitting the long ball, which is something that has been, it was missing for the first couple months of the season.
It's kind of amazing. I think it's 15 homers now in the last 5 games. Obviously, 12 of them came in 2 of those games. So where it comes from, I'm not sure. It comes out of nowhere. This team that has struggled offensively for most of the year has all of a sudden found their power stroke. And Reynolds has obviously been so hot since the beginning of June. Rowdy, it's nice to see him. That's a middle-of-the-lineup presence that's been coming through since the beginning of June. But, it'd be nice to get Jack Sawinski going. Obviously, in that homestand, we've seen Cruz hit some long home runs. So, yeah, it's obviously very important, in today's game to hit the ball in the ballpark, especially if you can't bunch hits together or you can't, if you struggle with runners in scoring position. The one way to combat that and score more runs is hit the ball over the fence, and they've done a pretty good job of that here in July.
And you mentioned Rowdy Tellez. I know everybody's talking about this, that you haven't seen like a quote-unquote, seen it called a redemption tour like this. A guy who was pretty much, buried by most of us, including myself. I was like, if he couldn't get it together by the middle of July, the middle of May, that, we'd be talking about him out the door. And for him to be able to do what he's done to this, point in time where his OPS is creeping back up to almost 700 and actually, hitting for power, because, that's something that was mentioned by Ben Cherington, Derek Shelton, and everybody when he was brought in is, they kept on pointing to those 35 home runs a couple years ago, so they definitely do need that power from Rowdy.
Without a doubt, and, the kudos to the Pirates for showing that patience, because I didn't think he'd make it through May. I mean, personally, I'm wondering, with a guy struggling that much and having the fan base turn on a guy, I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it, to where, he's getting booed every time he walks to the plate, every time he walks on the field. And, and that's hard to perform like that. I mean, I don't know how you recover from that. And so it got to the point where he wasn't playing much at home, wasn't playing against lefties, wasn't playing every day. He was down to like a couple of starts a week. And I want to say it was maybe Toronto where it kind of got turned around, or he had a pretty good series in Toronto, and so it got him more at bats. And then as a hitter, when you start seeing the ball better, and you start barreling the ball up, and your timing gets better, obviously you're going to grow more confident, and so you can get on a little bit of a run. I didn't expect it to be like a 5 or 6 week run, and it's pretty much how long it's been since he's been swinging that bat. However long Toronto was. So it's tip your cap to Rowdy Tellez, because like I said, I don't know if anybody's really had to experience that, getting booed that loudly by your home fans, and now getting Rowdy chants because he figured out a way to get out of it and sustain it. And that's the big thing. Guys get hot for a week or two. I mean, other than Brian Reynolds, if you're hot for 2 weeks, that's pretty good. He's been hot for almost maybe a month or more now, and and obviously very important for the middle, because I think the biggest thing with the Pirates most of this year is the middle lineup. Where's our production been in the middle lineup? I mean, we've had Sawinski in there, we've had Taylor in there, not Taylor, we've had Sawinski in there, Olivares in there. These guys now finally with Cruz, Rowdy Tellez, and Nick Gonzalez. I mean, it's kind of a different look for sure, the middle lineup.
And we've talked before, John, about the influence of like the hitting coach, and I don't want to harp on this for too long, but I mean, everybody, of course, is pointing to the fact that Rowdy went to his dad, went to a former instructor from, I believe it was Toronto, his time there, and came back. And I pointed to a few years ago whenever Adam Frazier would go on a hot streak, it'd be because his dad noticed something with his hands in his at-bats, and then he'd go on one of those tears, at some point in time, almost, getting him to the All-Star game and stuff. My thing is, John, like with guys that you've seen or guys that you've worked with or, played with, I mean, is that like a common thing where it's like, them going outside the organization to somebody who knows them the best to be able to help them turn that stuff around?
You're seeing it more and more often nowadays. I mean, they have these baseball schools, whether it be pitchers going to these places with all the advanced metrics, or if it's hitters going to these hitting schools, and you develop relationships. Obviously, certain players, you come up and you have somebody that's worked with you through high school, college, or whatever. Back in the day, you didn't have hitting instructors. You didn't have a private hitting instructor. Even in the minor leagues, you didn't have a hitting coach. You had a roving hitting instructor that show up like maybe one weekend a month. And so you kind of were on your own. And so now with all this personalized hitting stuff, I mean, there's guys in the big leagues right now that have their own hitting coaches that they'll work with, and they'll show up periodically and work things. And so I think as a hitting coach, I've always felt that they got too much blame when things didn't go well, and they never get enough credit when things do go well. It's kind of a tough job. I think it's the hardest job in baseball is being a hitting coach, because you're never going to get that much credit. And so as a hitter, I think especially in the last decade or so, we've seen more of that, where hitting's hard, and so when you've got a voice in your head that you really trust, and that has worked with you, and you've had success because of him, it's hard not to just continue to take that advice. So you might not take the advice from your major league hitting coach, as well as you do with your mentor or your dad or your hitting coach that you had, since you were in high school. And so that's part of it. And you don't want too many voices in your head. And so you usually go to the voice that you've had the most success with. And then that's not a knock on any major league hitting coach or Andy Hayes or anybody else. It's just the way it's gone. I mean, I just sometimes you just got to hear a certain voice and you trust that voice. And so the major league hitting coach, maybe you listen, but maybe you don't. Take that advice as well as you do from your. I mean, I remember Josh Bell. I mean, I want to say it might not have started with Josh Bell, but Josh Bell's dad used to roll into town, and I'm pretty sure that they worked together when he was in town, and Josh Bell trusted his dad, it seemed like, more than the Pirates hitting coaches. And so, it just seems like for the last 10 or so years, the personalized hitting coach has been more in vogue than anything else. And to me, is so strange and crazy, because you're with your big league hitting coach and your assistant, and now there's a second assistant every day. And so, you got plenty of resources there. But these guys like to go back to the people that they've trusted and worked with the most growing up.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jack Sawinski earlier, and to me, I looked and I know it's like an extreme small sample size, but over his maybe past 50 plate appearances, his OPS is around 750, and he seems to be seeing the ball a lot better. And we knew that there were peaks and valleys, in Jack's game. It's just the type of hitter he is. But I do see that he is, possibly maybe working his way into one of his quote unquote hot streaks, as opposed to, the valley that he's been in for most of the season.
Yeah, hopefully so. And you want to talk about a guy that they've shown a lot of patience in like Rowdy. They sent him out. They were kind of forced to bring him back up a little quicker than they wanted to, and he continued to struggle. But yet, amazingly, they just kept throwing him out there because he does have game-changing power. We saw that at PNC Park the last series, and again last night in Milwaukee, to where he can hit the ball in the ballpark when he's making solid contact. I think he's showing more patience. I think he's been better at being on time with the fastball, which is a big thing for him. If he's hitting off the fastball, I think he's in a better spot. There's times where he's taken too many fastballs for strikes, and I don't know if it's because he's looking for something else or if his timing's off or what. But there's times you scratch your head and wow, why do you take that pitch? I mean, that might be the best pitch you've seen at bat. But now he seems to be more aggressive at the fastball, hitting off that. What I mean by hitting off that is you're looking for a fastball to hit and trying to take if it's not a fastball, or only jumping on something, a bad breaking ball or hanging off speed pitch. But I think when Jack's on time with the fastball, he's in a better spot. And if he gets on one of those tears, this is a whole different lineup. I've been saying this for a while now. We got Reynolds, we got Tellez. It'd be Cruz. You always expect more from Cruz, and he seemed to be heating up at the end of that homestand. Sawinski's swinging it better. I mean, it's a whole different lineup if you can get Tellez, Cruz, and Sawinski going, because they all have game-changing power.
Yeah, and you talk about that because with the Pirates, there hasn't been much getting it going or actually dropping off too much either. As I was saying at the beginning of this, they're 44 and 47 as we're recording. They're about to set major league records, season records for, having so many games without a 3-game losing streak or a 3-game winning streak. And I know that Pirates fans are kind of harping on that a decent amount. But within the clubhouse, how much is the team living and dying by each win? And it is really difficult to do that, John. There's no easy way to put it, to not have your dip of a 6-game losing streak or get a couple sweeps in a row. I mean, this is something I've really never seen before.
It is bizarre because every team's going to go on a good run for a week or two, and then every team's going to go on a bad run for a week or two, and you got to have those streaks, and take advantage of them. And I just think that the offense has been too inconsistent. It's our pitching is too good to lose 3 in a row. I mean, that they've kept us in so many games. So you look at it that way. The pitching is too good for this team to go on an extended losing streak, and the offense hasn't been good enough to let us win 3 in a row or more. And that's kind of been the thing. I mean, thank goodness for our pitching, because we haven't gone and lost 8 of 10, or even 3 in a row for a while. But offensively, if it starts to click, this pitching staff is good enough, even with a couple of injuries to the starting rotation. The pitching staff is still good enough, to where if you can get a little more consistency up and down that lineup, to where you might finally see the 5-game winning streak, or you win 8 of 10, or 10 of 14. And for this team to make postseason, they're going to have to go on a run like that. I've been waiting for this run here for a couple months, and it just hasn't happened. But as we've seen, this team's starting to heat up a little bit offensively, and maybe this is the time. I mean, you get 2 out of 3 here in Milwaukee, go to Chicago, face the White Sox. I mean, you like your chances of at least winning that series, maybe sweeping them.
Yeah, I would hope so with that. And that's, going up to Milwaukee is always tough, but they, at least for one game, were able to, face their fears in that one. But you mentioned that the pitching staff, and we were talking about like Andy Haynes' name, being in the news or being on X or Facebook or just discussion boards everywhere. We're not hearing much about Oscar Marin this year. And even I always like to mention, Justin Message, the bullpen coach, what they've been able to do with some of the pitchers, and then also, some of the bullpen arms as well. I mean, it's been rocky at times, but even with the bullpen injuries, with Bednar, with Majinski, working his way back from injury at the beginning of the season. I mean, this pitching staff in general, with a couple blips here and there, has been, pretty much locked down.
Yeah, as I mentioned with Haynes, hitting coaches don't get enough credit and take too much blame when things don't go well. Kind of like an offensive coordinator in football. Pitching, it's the same thing. You rarely. I remember when Ray Searage was here, he seemed to get some credit for some reclamation projects. But there hasn't been hardly any talk of Oscar Marin. It's like, oh, the pitching's great. The pitching's great, and that's the same thing. Like I said about Haynes, is the pitching coaches he's not getting enough credit for as good as his pitching staff has been. And you mentioned the injuries. You lost Martin Perez, you lost Marco Gonzalez. You lost Bednar. Ryan Borucki was, to me, a huge loss, and nobody ever talks about Ryan Borucki. It looks like we're going to get him back soon, if not this weekend. Definitely by the end of the after the All-Star break. Dowry Moretta had some awesome stretches last year. Who's missing the entire year? Majinski started off slow. He bounced back. He looks great. What they've done with Luis Ortiz, that should be a lot of credit going towards Oscar Marin. Luis Ortiz looks like a different man this year than last. Even, he came up 2 years ago throwing 100. He didn't look as good as he does right now. Luis Ortiz, probably going to stay in that rotation, or at least I think he should. And so Bailey Falter, who has struggled, hopefully he won't be out too long. So yes, there's a lot of success stories, coming out of the bullpen with Message, starting games. Obviously, you worry. Usually when you lose Jared Jones for a period of time, looks like about a month, and Bailey Falter, and 2 veteran lefties like Gonzalez and Perez for a while, you think you're doomed. But everybody's kind of stepped up and done a heck of a job. And with Quinn Priester pitching Tuesday night, he looked as good as we've seen him. And so there is some pitching depth. Obviously, guys are going to coming back healthy here as we head into August, and it looks pretty good as far as your starting rotation depth and your bullpen depth. And so, there should be some kudos for sure for the pitching side of it, the staff that helps out with those guys.
Yeah, and I know that people my age are not very fond of the opener at times, but for the Pirates, what they did for the last 2 months of last season, and what they've done for the majority of their opener and bullpen games this year. I mean, for some reason, they can just get it to work, and I don't know what it is. And like you're mentioning Priester last night, I mean, Priester came out, and I want to see that kid succeed so much that it's crazy. I mean, I'm a fan. Like, I'm not just a guy. I come on here and I talk, but I'm a fan. And the way that kid works and how hard he works, and it's not putting down how hard everybody else works. But yeah, you want to see that from him. And you mentioned Ryan Borucki. Ryan Borucki is just a character. I think back to that game when I think it was Shelton, Donnie Kelly, and somebody else, maybe even Andy Haynes. Everybody got tossed. And Ryan Borucki stood up at the top of the steps there and was saying, "It was me who said it." And it's good to have those types of guys, in the locker room that are, standing up for your players and your coaches. So that's where I would kind of go is like, who's going to be the leader in this clubhouse? Because it kind of seems like, somebody's going to have to be that.
Well, that's obviously an important role, just to make sure everybody's worried about the right things. You do got some veterans like Tellez, obviously Reynolds is up there, and Andrew McCutcheon, and on the pitching side you got Chapman, and Mitch Keller has kind of turned into that guy, and I always feel that the clubhouse leadership, it's important in certain areas, but it's not as important as going out and playing. And I think that's where you got to have the singular focus of just going out there and winning today's game. You can't really worry about what happened yesterday or get too caught up in your own stats. If you can get everybody on the same page, worrying about winning that game and not worrying about going 2 for 4 and who cares about the score, that's the one thing that I think is really important, to just go out there and do what you can to help a team win, and we have some guys like that, and Borucki is certainly, fits that mold, and he's a guy last year that was really it started out maybe as a situational lefty, and then you see him pitching late against lefties and righties. That's what I mean about when I say that we missed this guy, because he was outstanding last year. I mean, he led all of baseball in the whip, if I'm not mistaken. He had like 4 walks all year, and again, it was lefties and righties, but as far as the clubhouse leadership thing, I think they have enough guys in there to make sure things are kept in order, and you got guys out there playing hard and playing to win, and it's one of those things to where when you win, you don't need a leader. Everybody's having a good time, and who cares if you lose? Well, you don't want things to get out of control, and then that's where you kind of got to keep things in order a little bit and make sure that people are worried about the right things.
Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucs in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucs in the Basement VOUCH store, with products from places like Split Rock Coffee, coffee with a purpose, established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America, or Camp Craft Cocktails, more than cocktails. It's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucs in the Basement, proudly brought to you by VOUCH. Visit our VOUCH store at bucsinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We're talking about the leadership and not letting things get too awry and different stuff like that. And I mean, we're talking about getting on that win streak. And is it as simple as, this offense finally turning it up and relying on the guys that are here? I mean, we didn't even mention, Joshua Palacios is a little bit of a spark plug. His numbers overall for his career are, average to a little bit below average, but he seems to be a guy that, people gravitate towards, or that at least gives some energy and stuff. So that would be like one of my last questions for you here, John, is it just as simple as if the offense gets hot, and baseball's not that simple, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but is it just that simple that if the offense gets hot, then this team goes from being, 3 games out of the wild card spot to maybe in the wild card spot or a game up like St. Louis did, over the past few weeks?
You gotta be able to get consistency from your offense first and foremost, and your consistency is gonna come from 8 or 9 guys that are out there doing a job. You don't just, like you said, the game's hard and the hitting is hard. And so you just can't rely on, Reynolds is doing this, and Tellez is doing this, and well, maybe Sawinski's getting hot, or maybe Cruz. Okay, Reynolds isn't going to continue to hit at this pace. Tellez isn't going to continue to hit at this pace. I mean, things always kind of even out and average out. And so, they're doing great, and they've been carrying us here for the last 4 or 5 weeks, it seems like. When they regress, which is inevitable, they're not going to stay this hot for the rest of the season, for the whole second half. That's why it's important to have a deeper lineup, to where when your guys that are hot cool off, you have other guys that have been there, done that, and are also contributing. And so that's where, I'll come at you and say, Key Brian Hayes has to hit better. O'Neal Cruz has to be a little more consistent. Jack Sawinski has to hit better. Michael Taylor has to be more productive when he's in the lineup. We've been pretty consistent with Nick Gonzalez. It's been great to see what, again, Reynolds and Tellez has done. But you need other guys to contribute as well. You can't just sit here and hope that 2 guys get hot and carry you, because they're going to cool off, and you need depth in your lineup. You need guys up and down the lineup to be contributors offensively. And so that's why, do we have enough? I don't know. I mean, based on the first 90 games, I'm going to say offensively we don't have enough. So I'm hoping that there will be a move made out there to improve this offense, to bring in a proven bat, if it's available, to come in here and, to be that stable force. Because so far, it hasn't been a stable offensive club. It's just kind of been, up and down, up and down, up and down. They'll score 12, and then they go and, get 1 run or 2 runs the next 3 or 4 games. It can't work like that. You gotta be able to have consistent at bats, consistent approaches, consistent offensive performance throughout your lineup, because there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are cold. Well, you need to have 2 or 3 or 4 guys that are hitting the ball well to be able to consistently put runs on the board.
Yeah, and I look back too on that. I mean, even like the 2011, 2012, and different stuff like that, adding guys like, a Ryan Ludwig, who's a professional hitter, a Derek Lee, Marlon Byrd, because a lot of people are saying, and this may be going too deep and far into discussion, is just that, even a rental guy wouldn't be enough to get this team, turned around. We need people that are going to be here for longer. But I think, you get a professional hitter and you put him in that lineup, then maybe it's something that can be there when Reynolds cools off or Tellez cools off.
100%. I mean, when you have proven guys that have had success at the major league level, especially hitting in those clutch situations. This team has struggled with runners in scoring position. I think hitting with runners in scoring position is the hardest thing to do as a hitter in Major League Baseball. It's very difficult. Pitchers don't want to throw you anything to hit. You got to be patient. You got to be able to not chase and wait for a pitch to hit against the opposing pitcher's best stuff. And so, it's only going to get more intense, and it's only going to be more pressure the deeper you go into the season, the deeper you stay into the race. If they stay in this playoff race, and they're in September, and you come up with the bases loaded, 2 outs. I mean, those, you'd like to have experienced hitters that have been there and done that in those situations, and we don't have many of those guys, just a couple. And so it even gets more ramped up when you go, if you make the postseason and you're in those situations, there's more pressure on you. And again, hoping that your young players are going to handle those situations and get you to the next level, get you to the next series. I mean, that's wishful thinking, and that's why I think it's important to have those veteran guys that kind of can slow their heartbeat down in those situations and not get overwhelmed or get too hyped up and come through in those at bats. And so, for me, the hot and cold, it kind of has kept us 500. But I think to get to the next level, to get to the postseason and beyond, I mean, you got to have some guys that have had success in those big time situations.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, with Joey Bart getting back up and healthy, I mean, he's kind of having a very small sample size once again, but his hitting pretty well. Hopefully Henry working on some stuff, down in AAA, because I look to like how young this club, actually is, even though with those veterans, even like a Michael A. Taylor, who's, been with some, competitive ball clubs and been around. But I mean, a lot of this, even, starting at the beginning of this year, was like, we have a lot of guys with, not a ton of major league experience that are going to be relied upon to play pretty big roles on this team.
Yeah, and again, that's another thing, how you gain experience. I mean, you're just not born to hit in certain situations or to hit at certain levels. It's, I think the learning from your failures and learning from your successes really is what, makes you a good Major League Baseball player. And I think, as we talk about, it'd be nice to have some guys that have been there and done that and had postseason experience, or been in the league a long time and have had great success in pressure situations. But they've had to start somewhere too. They had to live through these experiences themselves to gain that knowledge to be able to handle those situations. So obviously, as a young player, I mean, they get thrown out there and in situations, sometimes they handle them well, maybe not so well. Nick Gonzalez has been a great example of a guy that can hit with runners in scoring position as a young player. He seems to be a guy that's pretty calm in those situations. Joey Bart, by the way, you just brought him up, and he's been playing every day. It's over Grandal. It's not Henry Davis. They sent out delay, obviously. Grandal is no longer getting a lion's share. I want to say Bart has like 17 RBIs and just 70-some at-bats. I mean, that's production. 2 grand slams. He seems to not be overwhelmed in those situations. But again, the catching position we thought was going to be such a good offensive position this year, and it really hasn't been. But Bart has certainly been a guy that's kind of showed up and had some big hits for this club, as is Nick Gonzalez. We haven't talked a lot about second base. We thought it was going to be Peguero over there, and it's been Gonzalez since I think early May, and he's been great in those situations, being very productive. And so you think of that at the catching position, the second base position. We expect more from our shortstop. All of a sudden, our first baseman's hitting, our left fielder's hitting. We need some production out of right field, center field, and third base. You get that, man, you're all of a sudden, your lineup looks pretty good. That's what I talk about with not having those holes in your lineup to where a pitcher can look at, here's 7, 8, 9. It's, an easy inning. And so, yeah, things are turning around. Like I said, I think there's less holes in this lineup now than there has been pretty much all year, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, and John, that's why they play 162, and that's why, you'll be calling the games. I'll be watching every game or listening to it. But it's always great to talk to you, John. Always great to have you on here. And we'll definitely do it again sometime, hopefully when the Pirates maybe are in the wild card.
Yep, you bet. Always a pleasure, Craig. Obviously, you got my number. Hit me up. We can always sit down and have a good baseball chat anytime. And again, hopefully next time we're chatting, we're talking about, being in the playoff race.
Absolutely.
If I see the changes in this town. They change, they say